Welcome back. My name's Sondra Morgan.
I'm Lynne McCarthy.
And we're filming another episode of the Greater Boston Paranormal TV.
We're here at America's Stonehenge and we're going to be interviewing the owner, Dennis Stone, today. And we look forward to taking you through a tour of the site.
Do you feel it? It went through like a path, like a wave. Are you still here with us? What are your intentions? Murder. Oh,
no! Well, here we are with Dennis Stone, and he is the owner of America's Stonehenge, and he's going to tell us a little bit about it. I have a question. Can you explain to us what a henge is and what the significance is?
Yeah, a henge, well, the interpretation today is that it's a bank and ditch. If you look at Stonehenge, there's a bank and ditch around it. Avebury in England has a bank and ditch. And actually the Newark, Ohio mounds have kind of a bank and ditch too. So it means, a henge means a bank and ditch. They actually dug down, made a big trench, and then they piled the dirt either on the outside or the inside of the site. Stonehenge is unique because the bank and ditch are reverse of the rest of them in Western Europe. It's very unique in that manner. Some people used to think the word henge meant hanging, because Stonehenge looks like hanging stones, like the hanging from the air. And then another interpretation was they hung people there off Stonehenge, off the big rocks. But I think today it means bank and ditch. So we really don't have that here. So why we call it America's Stonehenge is because of the function. The astronomical alignments are similar to Stonehenge in England. And we changed the name of this place 40 years ago this year. It used to be called Mystery Hill.
Okay.
And before that was called Mystery Hill Caves. And when we opened in 1958, it was called the Stone Ruins of New Hampshire for a very short period. And then my dad, during the winter of 58, 59, changed the name. And 1963, he dropped the word caves because everybody thought we were caves like polar caves in New Hampshire, confusing them. And these are man-made structures, not natural formations, you know. So the henge word, it was confusing. I've been to Stonehenge in England a number of times. I used to think it meant hanging stones from the air. That's one interpretation I had. But today I think it's bank and ditch, yeah. So we don't really have that here. We do have the monoliths with the alignments, and 57 different alignments with the sun, moon, and stars here.
Okay, so for in layman's terms, for example, you're saying bank and ditch. What layman's terms would you say that represents?
So if they can Google Stonehenge or any of those sites I mentioned, you know, you can actually look at it, and there's like a big ring around it of earth, and they actually took, I mean, these are enormous trenches. They could originally at Avebury stand a telephone pole at the bottom of the trench, and the top of a telephone pole would just barely be even with the surface. That's how deep they dug. But that dirt came out of there, they piled it as a ring around it. Okay. So it's not only deep, but it was high too. They don't believe there are fortifications. What they think is that these rings were probably marking a sacred area. You know, you go in there and you're in a sacred spot. You're outside, you're not in the sacred area anymore. I mean, these things are 5,000 years old, 4,000 years old. They're prehistoric, so it's kind of hard to tell what was in the mind of the builders. But they don't seem to be fortifications. They don't seem to be battlefields, that kind of thing, you know. So something ceremonial, I think.
Okay.
And our site does have a wall that wraps around 15 acres. And we believe today, after all these years we've been here, only in the last half a decade or so, that it's a serpent body. And it's an undulating wall that wraps around, it touches every astronomical alignment stone, and it comes back in front of its head, and it looks like it might be biting its tail. And that would be the Ouroboros, the circle of life, infinity, and other meanings too. And inside that 15 acres, we're thinking that the serpent can represent many different things. On a medical staff, I think it means healing. It's in the Bible with Adam and Eve. It's also St. Patty driving out the serpent worship out of Ireland, even though there were never any snakes. I've been to Ireland before. But it might represent also protection. So that 15 acres might be protected land and sacred. It's a possibility. You know, again, we can't talk to the builders, but that's what it seems to be designed for. So.
Do you feel like there was they lived inside these stone hedges, or do you feel it was just more ceremonial?
I think more ceremonial. There's about 800 sites from Quebec and Ontario all the way down towards Virginia. And these sites, similar to this in the features, the structure, the way it's designed, the orientation out of true north, And because of serpent walls and we have windows and all sorts of other features, there's actually 25 categories of features with these structures, I guess. The ones in Western Europe, like Stonehenge, are 50,000 of these megalithic sites in Western Europe. And they don't seem to be places where people lived. They seem to be places where people worship. They could be burial sites, so tombs, temples, and monuments over there. And that's a frustration to archaeologists because archaeologists like to find artifacts. In a church today or any other type of religious place, usually they're kept fairly clean. You don't find a lot of junk in there. At a place where you live, you'll find the middens where all the trash is strewn. You'll find a lot of different things. So today over in Europe, they're using Worldview 3 satellite, they're using LiDAR, they're using other technologies to look for where did the people live, because they lived in hide, wood, or bark homes, and those are perishable, and they're below the surface. So, where is it? So they're starting to locate those, and they're starting to find household goods and stuff like that, and it tells a story about how the people lived, and maybe who the people were. So most of the sites in Western Europe, the stone sites, are not where people lived. It's not the Flintstones living in the chambers, nor here, we think. The structures aren't that large inside. A lot of work went into them. We're looking at a roof slab down there that weighs probably about somewhere around 8,000 or 9,000 pounds, and that used to be on top horizontally. And the structure, it fell over, and then one next to it has a stone that's similar size that fell into the chamber. But the inside are not that large, but ceremonially they would probably suit the purpose, putting offerings in there. Maybe somebody came up here and had a vision quest, maybe a priest stayed on the site. But generally speaking, people lived away from this hilltop and they came up here to do ceremonies, is what we think, With the astronomical alignments, summer solstice, spring and fall equinox, cross quarter days, maybe they held a celebration, maybe it was like a little Mecca. People came from around the area, they came up here for a wedding, for a death, or maybe for a summer solstice sunrise or set,
So tell us, we're going to take you on a tour of the property, but tell us some of the things that we're going to see, some of the things that are around us and some of the things we're going to see on the property.
So yeah, we're going to go into some stone chambers. The Oracle Chamber is probably one of the largest still intact. It has 5 closets, it has 2 carvings in it, it has a chimney flue, used to have stone louvers. It has 2 underground drains, and it has an oracle tube, this tube that goes 6 feet to the sacrificial table, which we'll see also. It's about a 9 by 6 foot stone that weighs about 9,000 pounds, set up on 4 legs. And it could have been used for many different purposes. We'll see that in a little bit. We're going to see some of the astronomical alignments today. I'll show you some of the underground drains. They made a complete network of drains here to keep the place dry. And it's the drains were storm drains basically, and they engineered them first and they built a site over it. And you can see we're sitting on bedrock. This is how most of the hill looked 4,000 years ago. It didn't have all the trees and soil up here, so you're in probably an open area up near the heavens, kind of, And let's see what else. We'll see, we have a courtyard, we have a plaza area, and we'll go up on the platform and I'll show you some of the alignments. We started working on those in 1965, and so we'll see some of them too.
So the sites that you have excavated here, are you doing more excavations, or are you just staying with what you
Yeah, it's never done. Actually, good question. Yeah, it's never done. I mean, they started in 1937 with Mr. Goodwin, and it continued up to 2 years ago when our archaeologist, she's in her 80s now, and she retired. She's trying to find a replacement. She was the president of New Hampshire Archaeological Society, and she was with us for 32 years. And now she's just trying to find somebody to replace her to do work up here. So yeah, we want to do more. I would say that in 85 years, if you took all the shovel test pits, all the excavations, put them together in one area over the 106 acres, you'd have about 1 acre out of 106 acres excavated. But excavation's kind of invasive. Once you dig it up, you kind of destroy it. So we try to do ground penetration radar first. Look for something. If we see something, we'll do a shovel test pit. It's a small little 50-centimeter hole. If there's something there, then they lay out the grid and they start to go with a full, excavation, Because again, when you dig it up, future generations with better technology won't be able to get back in there, And that's what Mr. Goodwin did in here. He really cleaned it up nicely. Some of the chambers we think were tombs, and if the soil was still there today, we could send it out to have it analyzed. If it had certain trace elements, like maybe potassium, calcium, and things, they could probably say, yes, this was a human burial perhaps, But the dirt was taken out 85 years ago, sifted, looking for artifacts you could hold. They didn't have the technology back then, so unfortunately. But there's areas of the site here still that haven't been dug yet.
Really?
So
you think there's a lot more potentially here?
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
Very nice. Awesome.
All right, you want to go on a tour?
Yes.
You ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Is that a wrap? Okay, we're kind of in the center of the site at the sacrificial table. The stone you're looking at weighs about 9,000 pounds, and if you look at it, kind of a bell shape to the outside of it. And on the top surface is a groove. It's fairly deep and fairly wide, the groove. Kind of looks rectangular, and then it comes down here to like a little runnel. And when it rains, or if you pour water on here, it kind of runs down through here, and in the bedrock right by our feet, there's actually a cutout. Looks like it's been removed, a piece of stone, where either the fluid went into that, or you could even set like a vase in there, perhaps, you know, to collect whatever the fluid is. It's much bigger than any lye stone for making soap. Cider press are usually about 12 to 18 inches above the ground. This is about 33.5 inches from the bedrock on 4 legs. And when Mr. Goodwin came and photographed it, and pictures going back way before Goodwin, in 1900 and 1920, the soil was up near the bottom of the table. It appeared that the table was just sitting on the earth, and the dirt would be up to your knees, actually. And they removed all that dirt. They found it was sitting on 4 legs, which was a big surprise. And then they found that speaking tube underneath the table. Right. So the groove actually looks rectangular because of the shape of the bell, but it's actually 9 inches narrower at the top than it is here. It's a trapezoid shape. The oracle chamber is on the east side of the stone, and you can't really tell there's a chamber there today. It's actually a ridge of bedrock that starts way over here, a couple hundred feet, and it runs along here, and it looks like it's a continuation of that, what we call a sheep back, just an outcropping of bedrock. So if you're standing up here watching a ceremony, behind you, looking down at the table, you probably didn't realize there was a chamber, and then if the voice came out, you might think it's a spirit or an oracle or something like that talking to you. You can see it's large enough for a person, large enough for an animal. About 75 miles from here, at one of the 800 sites in Shutesbury, Mass, they call it Mount Mineral. There's chambers there, but a farmer overturned a big slab, and on the bottom of the slab that was facing the earth is a raised carving or an anaglyph, and it has the same shape as a table. Right in this spot right here, there's a circle, like a lip of a bowl, perhaps, in the same spot right here. And on it, there's a person lying on their back with something across their neck. But the person actually is basically covering the whole table. And there was a person, it was a pretty good sized person, you know. If in fact that they were using this for inspiration for that, because it looks like the same shape, bell shape, person lying on their back, and right by their left foot is this circle right here. It's like they came up and saw a ceremony and went back and created that design, you know, that anaglyph, you know, if you will. But if it was, again, very large. Some people suggest it could be an embalming table, a birthing table, sacrificial, ceremony. And other people said, oh, it's just a big lye stone for making soap, you know. And usually they're about this big, about this thick, and I can pick them up. This is about 9,000 pounds, and we're not going to be picking that up. It's very, very large. And how do you get it, if it was a cider press, how do you get your horse and your wagon in here to bring all the apples and to take all the, you know, all the crushed apples or the pulp out of here and take your, you can't, I can't get my little.
Why the secret compartment underneath with someone
and what's the purpose of that? Yeah, to make a line, you know, a hose to bring the, you know, product into a barrel, and it doesn't make any sense. And then we got these big monoliths here on both sides, and behind that monolith is that pen area, and again it's trapezoid in shape, you know. And it's to the heavens. We're on top of a hill, and I can see a ceremony taking place, whatever the ceremony was, you know. You can use your imagination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you had any weird occurrences that you've heard of that have happened
On this
on this site?
Well, we've had many different psychics come up here and give their, you know, they've actually had different feelings. We've had Ethel Myers, she was here back. Hans Holzer, yeah. Ingrid Beckman up here, and Nancy Abel, and different psychics over the years, even in the 60s, before Hans even visited us, you know. And we have the reports in our building, and my dad kept everything, all the files. He was great at keeping things. We have things going back 100 years. But people have different, you know, experiences here, you know. We even had crystals sent from our upper well. It's actually a mine shaft, and quartz crystals are very popular among ancient people. And even today, you know, quartz crystal, people love that for the energy, the piezoelectric effect, maybe worshiping, and jewelry. They cairns. A lot of cairns we have in the Northeast and elsewhere have quartz on top. It's funny, you know. So they sent it out to California to back in '66 to a couple that could actually do reading of crystals, you know, and we have that report too. So that was almost 55 years ago, I think. So as far as strange things going on, I don't know. You'd have to read Hans Holz's book, 1992, called Long Before Columbus. And there were other reports, including Hans Holzer, and that show came out 2 years ago. It was called Ancient Evil, and they filmed this for a week 2 years ago. Okay. And they had the psychic, her name is Cindy Koza. Turns out they're on a brand new program on travel now. They have a brand new program, but she's from Ashland, New Hampshire, and when she's living in, I think, out west in Colorado. When she was here filming for the week, she goes, I'd never heard of this place, and yet I'm from New Hampshire, so that happened. But she had her own readings, she had her own thing here, and that's on the TV show too.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So Dennis, tell us something about these white lines that we see on those.
Yeah. Anything with white paint is man-made. It could be something modern by the quarrymen in the 1800s, and they were stripping out the site, unfortunately, or it could be something maybe older, original to the building of the site. And we have several of these little cutouts in the bedrock. This one's shaped almost like a baby chick, if you will. You can see the outline. The paint here is kind of faded, and you can see that little runoff. And I showed you a kidney shape of the same thing, and there's a wine. They all seem to have this little runoff. It's been interpreted as a libation bowl. You know, you put fluids in there, it would drain off, it would please the gods for fertility. And 25 years ago, I was in Malta, and I asked the guide, because I saw similar ones in Malta on the bedrock. I said, what was that purpose of that? And he says, well, it was for fertility. They would put some sort of fluid in there. I don't know what the fluid was, but it would be an offering, and it would flow off into the ground, you know, and it was for fertility, for animals, for people, for crops, or whatever. So we have probably 6 of these, one shaped like an apple, one like a wine bottle, one like a kidney. We have this shape, and we have a couple others too. We really don't know. Somebody took the time to do that. Why would they do that? For practical purposes, it really doesn't serve much of anything, but maybe for ceremonial purposes it would, you know. And we are in the avenue that will take us eventually to the Oracle Chamber. And until the 1950s, actually the wall continued through here. We have the photographs of it. So this is kind of a blocked area here for some reason. But now with the flow, with the people coming through, make their way past here. And the chamber behind you, you can see the roof slab. That's a chamber in ruins. It's had 3 inscriptions found in it since the 1960s. Inscriptions, according to Dr. Berryfeld from Harvard, were Phoenician, Libyan, and Celtic, according to his interpretation. We got 3 carbon datings from that. A piece of root that grew through the wall, dated to 1690 AD. That puts it back before the Patty family. A lot of people thought Mr. Patty had built this in the 1800s, the whole site, as a folly, as some sort of exercise. We don't know why he would go to the trouble of pouring slabs all over the hilltop, building all the walls and all these chambers. For what purpose would that suit him, you know? But that chamber there, the oldest date right there was 4,000 years old in 1971. And in 69, we got a 3,000-year-old with charcoal samples. And that chamber has 2 windows, and it has a lintel that weighs about 1,000 pounds. The whole thing is crashed down. Recently with LiDAR, we found out the floor plans of that chamber, another one further down, the courtyard down here, which we believe Patty built his house over and used it as a foundation. They're all trapezoid in shape. They are not rectangular or square. They don't have 90-degree corners, but they are in fact trapezoid. The groove on the table, we recently measured it again, and it's trapezoid, 9 inches shorter at the top. And there's a little, what we call the animal pin. It's a little structure of stone walls. And originally we thought it was kind of square shaped, but the LiDAR, you can see down to 1 centimeter. And if you look at it today, go and look at these things, you can see that in fact they are trapezoid. That's an old world, whether it's South America, in Mexico, or over in England. Some of the megalithic sites have a trapezoid doors or floor plans. So I don't think this is a piece of evidence that Mr. Patty built this. I think it's a piece of evidence against that. And so the chamber in ruins, they have attempted to take the roof slab out of there and try to restore it in 1964. And recently we were looking at doing that too. It's just kind of a problem getting that big slab of stone out of there safely, you know. So, and our chief archaeologist, he passed away in 2016, and he was kind of leading it. So it's come to a stop again, you know. Our archaeologist has retired, but our chief archaeologist, Dr. David Stewart Smith, he was with us for 40 years. And unfortunately, at the end of his life, we were just getting ready to try to do that again, and then that came to a stop. It seems like that happens here quite a bit. But we can, we can move on, and we can head towards the couple other structures, and then we'll be at the Oracle Chamber. I'll get a club and club away.
Dennis, tell us about some of the things we're seeing around us.
Yeah. Well, we're close to the entrance of the Oracle Chamber, and this part of the site is original, although they did a little restoration work Dr. David Stewart Smith did back in the 1980s when that wall right there had partially collapsed. But this slab here is a roof slab, actually. It weighs about 14 tons. We know where it came from. It came from this direction over here in an earth, what do you call it? It's a fault. It's an earthquake fault line, and it runs across the entire hill. This hill is actually bisected. The whole hill is split in half by this fault. A lot of the ancient sites, whether it's Machu Picchu in Peru, or some of the stone sites I mentioned over in Wales and Scotland, are built on faults too. We don't know why they did this, but about 90% of them in Scotland, the 700 stone circles, are built on or near a fault. But anyway, this stone came from there, and nature had, actually on that edge there, had split it nicely. These people were able to extract the stone. It weighs about 163 pounds per cubic foot, so you can do the estimate of the weight. They estimate it weighs around 28,000 pounds. You're able to move it from there, raise it up, and put these walls underneath it. And on top, you notice there's a little structure, and that's been partially restored. And this is the only two-story building on the site that remains today. It's a two-story structure. It faces true east, so the sunrise rises here in the equinox right into the chamber. And the whole site is actually orientated true north, south, east, and west. And they call us the double solar back in the 1950s, and that name kind of stuck for many years. So we think it's ceremonial. It's not a place you'd want to live in, I don't think. And that little structure on top, I don't know what it was used for, but it's right next to the sacrificial table area. So I think it's something to do with ceremonies. Okay. So you can see the size of the stones they were moving here, quite heavy and quite large. And this big monolith, this is a monolith. And this monolith here actually is sitting on little stone pedestals. And in the background, you can see another monolith standing. This is original. It's here in the 1900 photographs. We have 4 photographs also from 1920. This is still standing here. But that stone in the back had been knocked over by somebody. And Dr. David Stewart Smith, about 40 years ago, looked where it's sitting today, and he found all the little stone pedestals, just like this has underneath it. And he put the stone back on the pedestals, and it fit perfectly. Wow. So some people suggest these are male and female symbols in fertility. The female would be a little slightly wider hip, and the male would be more elongated, kind of the phallic symbol, but on both sides of the table. And I've had other ceremonial, there's other sites in the world that have something like this, so it's not, by itself, Right. So we're going to go into the largest chamber in a second. It's called the Oracle Chamber. And if you took the roof off, looking down, it would look like the letter Y kind of. And some people call it the Y chamber.
Are there inscriptions at all on any of these stones?
Great question. Yeah, 3 of the stones, they're about this big, are in the building today, in the visitor center. They were taken from that chamber in ruins back in the 1960s. And 1975, Barry Fell came along. He was at Harvard University, and he was an epigrapher, a study of ancient scripts. And he looked at these stones, and we have found some others since then. And he identified those 3 stones as Libyan, Phoenician, and another third one actually had design on it similar to Western European artwork, according to him. But after that, we found some Celtic ogham. And his theory was that the people that came out of Europe came out of Spain and Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula, and they hopped across the ocean, kind of like the direction Columbus came to America. And the inscriptions are found from Canada all the way down to Brazil. There are about 3,000 in North America inscriptions that are unknown, all the way out towards Alberta, Canada, and the West Coast. And Brazil itself has about 3,000. And they seem to be old world markings, and it raises a lot of controversy that people come over before Columbus from Western Europe, the Mediterranean, and Africa, and before the Vikings too. And that's still not settled today. So he wrote America BC in 1976 on our bicentennial year of the United States. Then he wrote Saga America and Bronze Age America. He passed away in 1994, still working on this whole thing with inscriptions.
So they haven't deciphered exactly.
Yeah, he deciphered some of them, yeah. And he said that was a sun temple dedicated to Baal on behalf of the Canaanites. The Phoenicians were the Canaanites, So that was his interpretation of the other one. The Libyan one, the stone was broken, so he couldn't get a complete reading on it. and the other one was more of a design thing, you know. But the Celtic Ogham also was reference to the sun god Bel, and he said, okay, that Bel and Baal are basic. Baal's in the Bible, or Baal, and he said the Celts were worshiping the same sun god, you know, as the Phoenicians. And I know a lot of ancient people passed their religions down even into Christianity. Some of our celebrations they have today, like Candlemas, is based on a cross-quarter day. It's right around Groundhog's Day, February, 1st. May Day, that's Beltane, the ancient, fires of Beltane. And we used to have Mayfairs in the United States when I grew up. At school, they had Mayfairs, and they had the Maypole, all fertility thing, I think. So some of those come right into us, even including Easter, I think, and that's based on the moon cycle and everything. So yeah, they have found inscriptions here. I'd say we have about 6 inscriptions that have been found here. 2 of them are in the chamber here, but they're only one looks like what they used to call a deer carving. Okay. But what it really looks like is the animal from Western Europe called the Iberian ibex. And there are a couple of different types of ibex because of the antler. It looks like an ibex. And Barry Fell says the inscriptions came out of Spain and Portugal. So it's interesting. I don't know if it's conclusive, proof. It won't satisfy everybody, that's for sure. But it is interesting nevertheless, And then there's an arrow carving found in 1967 near the exit. Originally, this was the entrance. You went in this way, and you came back out this way. Where we'll exit today was a window, and it's now an exit, so people can flow. It was damaged so bad by time and maybe kids playing in there that in the 1950s they decided to put a wooden staircase up. In the 1980s they changed it, did an excavation. They found a few stone tools there, and they rebuilt it as like a stone step, but it wasn't like that originally. And this had a lintel over it. This is all covered over. And the first photographs taken around 1900. This stone right where you're leaning today is in the picture with apparently somebody painted some numbers on here. Looks like about 1900, I think. And that's in Mr. Goodwin's book. We have those photographs. And this lintel was beautiful. And it had roof behind it made out of stone. And David Stuart Smith, around 40 years ago, he was looking for those stones. He felt they must have been pushed over here. We never did find a lintel stone. We don't have, it was a big stone, probably 1,000 pounds. I said, well, could it be this? It's too small. Could it be another one? And he goes, no, we don't know where it is today. So that originally was the entrance. It was facing west, sunset. And you would go in here, turn left, and we get in there, you can see how it's a pretty good sized chamber. And it's the biggest one on the site today.
Some interesting vibrations off this stone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really...
You're not leaving it, are you?
All right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going into the oracle chamber. This is one of the largest chambers on the site, still pretty much intact, and it had a roof right where you're walking in, as I mentioned. And this chamber runs about 27 feet. It runs north and south, true north and south, not magnetic. It has 5 closets. You can see the roof over your head. Big slabs of stone. These are all taken off the bedrock. It never leaks in here, and I think we're going to double check, but the whole top has clay, and it kind of keeps it from leaking, if you would. Behind you, off to your right, there's a little closet, and we have 4 more closets inside the chamber. The purpose of the closets is unknown unless there are places where people put little offerings, like votive offerings, something spiritual. And they're made very nicely. They were made, when they built the chamber. So I'm standing right here, and the name of the chamber is the Oracle Chamber, and it's because of this hole in the wall. And you notice right below here, the bedrock, they actually left a piece of stone. So if you're around 5.5 feet tall, roughly, plus or minus a few inches, you stand here, you can be at the proper height. You'll look inside this, and if you yell, the voice comes out on the other side, underneath the sacrificial table. So I've been to Delphi in Greece, and they had the oracles there. But in Malta, I saw holes in the walls too, and I said to the guide, what are those for? He goes, it's where somebody would speak, the voice would go through. People thought they were listening to a spirit or a god. It was kind of an oracle kind of thing, So this tube, when Goodwin found it, had a plug of stone here concealing it. And on the other side, underneath the table, there was a plug of stone too. It's like they closed it up, they blocked it. If you think of the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain, so somebody might have been standing here, and nobody would know it outside because this looks like just a ridge of bedrock over our head. You don't even know there's a chamber here. And the voice would go through during a ceremony, and people would hear this voice, speaking to him. So
it's the gods, right?
The god or goddess speaking to him,
yes.
Exactly, yeah. And it's kind of cool. You can take a peek at it. One of Goodwin's work is, yeah, you can stand here perfect.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. And the exit to this tube is actually flared out like a trumpet or a clarinet. It's actually acoustical. It actually helps the sound go out. We only learned that 3 years ago. There was some damage done to it, and we get in there and we had to restore just a little bit of it. We noticed it was flared out, which is kind of cool, like a musical instrument. Below it, if you like, there's like a bed in there. You probably didn't notice that walking in. There's a window, and right inside there goes an 8 feet. What would be the purpose of that for a shoemaker named Mr. Patty or that? I have no idea, but if you look inside of it, it goes way in there, and perhaps, yeah, a priest or priestess, somebody could actually go in there. See, it goes in quite a ways, yeah. If you were to lay in there, you could actually look out through the little window. If anybody came in, you would see them. You know, I don't know. Again, there's like a window right there. Yeah, right there. Isn't that cool, huh? And this part of the structure, the walls are vertical. And it's dry stone, no cement was used. And these stones, as you can see, there's no drill marks on these. That would be evident if Mr. Patty had built everything with his family. You know, all the little drill marks, the plug and feather, splitting stones. They don't show any signs of that.
Any idea how they would have moved any of these stones back in those
yeah, a lot of yeah. Well,
the movies were all like pulling them.
Right?
Yeah, it's just probably log levers, you know, inclined planes of earth, and a lot of just, you know, moving these stones would have taken a lot of effort. Right. But if the hilltop was pretty bare back then, they could go out and look at the bedrock and see where the fissures or cracks are, work those, split the stone, get it up, start shaping it, which we've learned over the last 40 years with Dr. David Stewart Smith and our state archaeologist, Dr. Gary Hume. He was a lithic specialist. He came down and saw that and said it's unmistakable that these big slabs were actually shaped using percussion flaking, not metal tools, but Stone Age tools. And he's still alive. He's no longer the state archaeologist. He's retired, but that was really something for him to come down and see that. He actually did 3 projects here back 40 years ago, and that was one of them, looking at the way the stones are quarried, shaped, or what we call dressed, you know. So we have a couple things we've seen, and then on the north side of this is actually a chimney flue. And the chimney flue's in the roof, of course, and it had 2 stone louvers until 1958. We have the photographs. Mr. Goodwin's photographed it back in the late 30s, and we have other pictures. And they would actually, you could adjust them to adjust a draft if you had a fire up here. Back around 1958, when we opened to the public for the first time, they disappeared. We have never seen them since. We have the photographic record of them, which is unfortunate. Now the chamber does go north and south here, and then it runs to the east. Now this is kind of cool. This big part of this big rock right here actually was part of the big rock right over here. And what I did is I put some white paint here, and right here, this was here, you know, went together, yeah. And it's like a big. I think they estimated this is 50 tons, maybe 100,000 pounds. Again, about 163 pounds per cubic foot for granite. Somehow they measured this or estimated. It's just an estimate, you know. This part of the structure is not vertical. It's actually corbelled. It's like an inverted staircase. As the wall goes up, it comes in, kind of in like this. And this is an old world technique. You can see it in some of the sites in Ireland, England, and other places. It's not a true arch though. You can see how it kind of comes in towards me. And that's how some of the corners of like the chamber and ruins we just found out with LiDAR, that it is actually, the corners are tilted in too. They're not vertical. They're tilted in, and they're not 90-degree angles. I mentioned trapezoid, you know. So we're discovering some stuff with LiDAR because, again, it can see down to a centimeter. It's pretty cool. But we knew this was core built because you can see it with your eyes, you know. As you come down here, you can see, I don't know who did that. Oops, put that up.
You're messing with your F.
F what? Well, bleep, bleep. So, you know, it's like a little, you might want to check it out. It's like a little bench seat.
Yeah, it is.
Now, this is the original shape of it. You can see the shape of the bedrock, or this boulder, excuse me. You can see the shape of it. That's how this would have looked. And again, you don't see any metal tool marks. How did they do a 90-degree cutout? And you can put a few people in here, and what's opposite is a beautiful closet, one of the nicest closets we have. It goes in and it goes to the right. Nothing was found inside of it, unfortunately. And then we have 3 more closets behind us.
I'm curious, what closets, what do you think they were used for?
Yeah, I think it's ceremonial, you know. I don't see any
Just
practical uses.
You don't think this was a home at one time?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I mean, although it has a bed there, I think
the bed and the bench and the closet.
It has all the comforts of home.
Right.
We might put the TV in there.
Right.
But I think
Where's the kitchen?
I think, you know, maybe during a solstice, equinoxes, and other special days, a priest might come up here and spend some time in here.
That's true.
Yeah.
And then we have that deer carving, which looks more like an ibex. Maybe a vision quest too. You know, sometimes they would draw things like their sacred animal that the Native Americans would do that too. You know, of course. It's a lot of speculation because we can't talk to the builders.
Right.
But when you see other sites around the world and you see little niches and little closets, sometimes they do find things in there like little offerings, little votive offerings or something like that. In this case, whatever was in there was either removed by the people that, you know, were here that built this, or later in time people took souvenirs out of here, and we know that happened here. My aunt and uncle came here in the 1930s and they picnicked up here. And before that, my dad's side, his first cousin's grandmother, Annie Gage, she came up here in the 1890s and played. So we have family connections going back to that. I only found that out 6 years ago, that we have back to the 1890s in the place. I wish she took some photographs. That would be cool too, you know. Because the oldest one we have is about 1900 on the site, way before Mr. Goodwin came along. Some people say, oh, Mr. Goodwin must have built this and built that, but we have 4 photographs from 1920, the Oracle Chamber, the sacrificial table, patio area, and the east-west chamber. Really covers the site. In 1935, the Haverhill Gazette was up here photographing a Reverend Ward in the chamber here and outside. You can see the site. And that's before Goodwin ever came here, you know, or bought the site in 37. But yeah, you can see it does have some comforts of home, but I don't think that's what the purpose was. I think maybe a priest or shaman or somebody could come in here, spend some time in preparation for a ceremony coming up like on a solstice, equinox, cross-quarter day. You can see, I mean, what's the purpose of that for a farm or a shoe shop, you know?
Right.
But as you come down here, I can show you a deer carving.
Okay.
Spider.
Yeah, just the
Spiders and everything, yeah.
in there.
Snakes, spiders.
Don't tell him.
Okay, I'm not going
Let's
in
move
there.
along.
Bats, the bats.
Oh no, I'm filming.
Or
Oh no!
We get the giggle session going on.
Oh yeah, I'm filming. We're rocking and rolling already.
Yeah, we
Oh,
got
absolutely.
action. Well, that's what we're doing. Well, the roof from this here kind of steps down. We mentioned the core building here, and then there's like a square opening. We wonder if that was like a skylight at one time. We just don't know. That would have to be excavated on top. So there's a lot of different things in this structure we still don't know about. But back in the 1930s, and probably before that, there's a little carving. I mentioned 2 of them. And one of them here is called the running deer carving. And the white paint surrounds it. It looks like it's running towards you. It's got like a little head. It's got an antler. It's got a back, and then it has a leg. But even by the 1950s, people said, gee, it doesn't look like a deer antler. You know, we have deer in the area today, but it looks like an ibex. And I did a little research a couple years ago on Google, and I pulled up the different ibexes in Western Europe. And the Iberian, the Spanish, Portuguese one, really looks like the antler of that, because there's a variation in the shape of the antlers. And that one there looks like that. And that's where Barry Fell thought that the inscriptions came from, you know, the Libyan, Phoenician, and Celtic came out of Iberia, Spain, and Portugal. So that's kind of a cool carving. It's always been there. There are 3 closets down here. And then at the exit, one of our tour guides in 1967 was giving a guided tour. And as he walked out, he looked up on the ceiling, and they found a little arrow carving, and it's pointed outward. We don't know the significance of it. It doesn't seem to be anything modern, you know. It seems to have always been there.
Pointing the way out.
Kind of pointing the way out, yeah. And actually, you know, one thing we think is that this window right here, we didn't clear out the trees enough. We did a forest management thing over the last 2 winters. We had a licensed forester we hired in 2018, and then we thinned out the entire hill. Unfortunately, in that direction, there's still a lot of woods. But we're interested in to see if the sunlight will come through this, what was a window, and illuminate this on a certain day. Wouldn't that be pretty spectacular?
Awesome.
Yeah. Because one we found 2 years ago was the watch house. We rode by that on the way up here. And we think that's the head of a 2,550-foot serpent. The chamber's next to it, and there's a quartzite stone. And even Hans Holzer in 1992, the forward was done by Barbara Hand Cloud. And she said back in 1992, this stone, I think, is significant. It's in the back wall. It's a very, very light-colored quartzite stone. The rest of it's kind of gray granite. And other people made comments over the years, like, what is that? Why is that there? Well, we actually had the trees cleared out. And in 2020, the spring equinox, the sunlight goes into it. And it not only illuminates the stone, but because of the shape of the entrance of the structure, it frames it. It's actually a shadow and light framing of it. About 8 o'clock in the morning, and 30 minutes later, it morphs from being framed to it looks like a hand with an index finger pointing back at it. And in Ireland, I've seen something similar at Newgrange, where the sunlight goes through a tunnel, but it's on the winter solstice sunrise, and it illuminates the back wall. It's kind of cruciform. Well, what we think it is that chamber is actually the womb. The sun, the rays, the fertilization, and then the hand pointing back at the fertilized egg. Newport Tower in Rhode Island, it's much more modern, we think, probably 14th century. In one of the arches is an egg, there's a window above it. And on the winter solstice in the morning, just like Newgrange, the sunlight goes through the window and it illuminates the egg very nicely. That one day a year. It might be, again, fertilization. So we have something going on here with illuminations as part of the 57 alignments with the sun, moon, and stars. So, you know, we have to clear out more trees.
Yeah, right.
Even though the leaves are off the tree, I think it's going to be close to winter that it will do that.
So you just continue to find all these alignments as you've gone along?
Yeah.
By
Since
being out here for significant
1965.
events?
Yeah.
Wow.
And actually the name America Stonehenge back in '59, the Saturday Evening Post did a whole feature on us, and they called it the Stonehenge of America. And that's before we knew about any astronomical properties of the site. And so that name was kind of a nickname for some years. And the reason they said that is because it has big stones, not because of astronomical. They thought of Stonehenge for some reason. But 6 years later, in 1965, we started clearing out the first alignment. And that was a winter solstice sunset alignment. And we've been watching that since, you know, for several decades now. That one's been open. And then we opened up the other ones too. But the illumination thing is about 2 years old. So sunlight going into the chamber.
Still finding treasures every day.
Yeah,
right?
you know, and I don't think they're all coincidences, you know, 57 coincidences, some of them,
Right.
you know, skeptics would think. Oh, it's just a coincidence. It's like, no, I don't think so. Not after a couple. A couple could be coincidences, you know. So this chamber is a mystery. You can see it's a pretty large chamber. It doesn't have a lot of space in it, but a lot of work went into constructing it, you know. But I think it's ceremonial. Not the Fred Flintstone and Wilmer, you know, living inside here with the little baby, you know, pebbles and all that stuff. There is a drain down at the end of it, and there's one when you walked in. It's silted in today. That drain runs outside, keeps that entrance dry, and then some channeling in the bedrock right there. You might see the groove there. The water goes underneath this. Yeah, and when it rains, you'll see it work. The roof doesn't leak, but the water does run in here. And then it goes down here. It goes into a 45-foot drain, and they started excavating that in the they did some excavations here in the 40s, and one of our archaeologists did some in 1967, and we have all of those records too. Inside the drain, they found some stone tools, which is always cool to find, you know, because things wash into the drains just like at home, you know.
Right.
So, yeah, so we'll be going out of this chamber eventually. We'll go up and see the astronomical alignments.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Can't shut her up.
All right, Dennis, tell us where we are now.
Well, we're standing at the astronomical center of the site. And the work on this began in 1965. My dad and other people before him knew there were stones out in the forest that were kind of shaped like arrowheads and stood on their end. And they're a little unusual, and they're not the normal wall type, you know, structure. So in 1965, they began clearing out what we call today the winter solstice sunset alignment. And in 1967, they were up here and they shot the first time we've ever seen this in modern times, the sun actually setting over that alignment. And I got those photographs just last fall from the person that took them. 3 years later, we came down here, my dad, my neighbor, and we lived about 8 miles from here. We came down and met the gentleman who actually opened that alignment in '65. He was a nuclear engineer working on the USS Nimitz, which is still out there, putting the reactors on it. And he came up from Virginia Beach, and he was up here, and we photographed it. It was a beautiful sunset. And in our visitor center today, we have a painting of that event. So after that, we began opening up other avenues. It was all forest around us. We had to clear out several hundred feet for each of these alignments. And it's actually still going on up to last year. We were up here opening up the lunar alignments that we never opened up. So it's, what, over six decades of this research. So all the alignments come together where we're standing. There were 2 stone cairns, 2 piles of rocks here. Goodwin photographed them, and by 1938 or 39, we have a picture of him with a hand winch lifting up rocks from here, putting them in the part of the ramp here in the platform area where we were standing a little while ago. And unfortunately, he thought that they were connected to the oracle chamber, which we were just in, and that they were hollow beehive chambers. But when he found out they were solid stone, he thought they were just heaps of stone here, and they were. So he decided to help rebuild part of that platform using stones from here. And there are a few still scattered down below us here. When he removed them, he found that the cutout in the bedrock below us, once those stones were out of here, he found where the sacrificial table came from. And the sacrificial table, of course, we were just talking about that, actually it fits into a cutout in the bedrock right below our feet today. So that had to be done first. The platforms were built, and all the alignments come together right here. And if you look out, you can see the rolling hills out here, and they took advantages of the dips where they set up some of the alignments. Summer solstice alignment, it comes right here. We have two yellow circles on this platform. This is where the southern cairn was, approximately, and that's where the northern cairn was. And we have diagrams of them and photographs of the cairns before he destroyed them. And they're true north and south of each other, so that stone out there is right underneath Polaris today. And that big stone, and 4,000 years ago, Thuban, Alpha Draconis was the pole star, and that was part of Draco, the constellation of the serpent, or the snake. And I mentioned earlier we had found serpentine walls, and some people think they were inspired by Draco, the constellation, as above, so below. So 4,000 years ago, and a little earlier than that, you would have been looking at Draco. It would have had Thuban. It wouldn't have moved. It would have been the only star in the sky not moving at that time. And then Draco would have been spinning around that star in the course of an evening. So that's true north and south, and it goes through a wall down here that we found just in the last couple of years. We believe it's a serpent wall also. It's called the true north-south. It seems to have a head and a tail, and in the middle is a big boulder, which we think could represent its prey. If it was only one like that, we'd say it's just a coincidence, but a lot of these, even in Connecticut and elsewhere, the middle of the serpent body gets wider, and it's either pregnant or it just ate something. And some of them seem to have like scales of stone, like they're shedding their skin too. And others undulate. And I don't think you can mistake these for farmers' walls. So not only do we have 57 alignments of the sun, moon, and stars, we have illumination, but we have maybe 14 serpentine walls that are possibly inspired by Draco. So there's a lot going on with the heavens here, kind of. And that's true of a lot of other sites around the world too, you know. So we have the 4 seasons: summer, winter, spring, and fall, and winter. We have the cross quarter days, which not everybody knows. It's called the mid-season alignment: August 1st, November 1st, February 1st, and May 1st. And these are actually the beginning of each season. So you have your quarter days, the seasons, and you have these days in between. But really, those days are the beginning of the season. So May Day is the beginning of summer, midsummer. Solstice is around June 20th, and we used to hear the first day of summer, but also midsummer solstice. August 1st is Lammas, and Lammas is the beginning of fall. By September, we have the mid-fall equinox. November 1st is All Saints' Day, the day after Halloween, All Souls' Day, and it's called Samhain by the ancient Celts. Beginning of winter, and that's kind of around the harvest and everything. And then you get into midwinter solstice. February 1st is Candlemas, Groundhog's Day. It's called Imbolc by the Celts. Beginning of spring. So it kind of goes like that. We have all those alignments here. Solar, we have lunar, and we have 24 star alignments here too.
You do a lot of solstice ceremonies.
Ceremonies.
Celebrations, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, particularly in the summer and winter, we have people come up here. And in the summer, when the weather's nice, we can have up to 1,000 people come up here, and we have a ceremony. The equinox coming up, gosh, I guess in about a week and a half or so, we'll have a drumming circle that evening. The Saturday, I think it's after, we'll have a ceremony here because it's a weekend, more people will show up, so the woman will be doing, she's been here for almost 30 years, and she's been doing ceremonies here on the solstice equinoxes. The cross-quarter days, not so much, you know, because not too many people know about them. You got a little friend there?
I do.
You do. So yeah, we'll have a celebration, and we open up special on those days. We'll be here like in the summer. The sun's up at 4 something in the morning. We open up at right after 4, and we have to close around 9:30 at night because the sun sets around 8:20. You know, so people come up very early. They'll go away, come back later that day, and have a ceremony and watch the sunset. By winter, you know, it's not so bad because the sunsets are like at 4 something in the late afternoon. And the equinox coming up is, you know, roughly, I think it's 6 something in the afternoon. I'll have to check the actual time. But that morning on this equinox, we'll be watching, the sun will be rising over a big monolith that's now fallen. It's about 8 feet long. A little bit later, we'll come up and we'll go down here and we'll watch the equinox over that stone that we talked about near the oracle chamber entrance. So we'll go from there to watch this. And then we'll go down about 8 o'clock in the morning and watch the sunlight go into the oracle chamber, I'm sorry, the watch house structure and the sunlight will illuminate that quartz stone. And then 30 minutes later, it looks like, again, a hand with an index finger pointing back at it. So 3 events for the equinox, spring and fall, on the rise. And on the evening, that boulder out there, there's the end of a wall. There's a monolith that's now fallen over, like a lot of them are. And then there's a hump in the wall. And the hump is part of that serpentine wall that goes around 2,550 feet, we believe. You know, we GPSed it. So it's 4 points that make the equinox sunset. And by the way, 10 years ago, you can see the summer solstice down there where the people are, that stone there. It's not really arrowhead shaped like a lot of them are. It's kind of asymmetrically shaped with a point on the left and sloped down to the right. But if you look over a little bit to the left, you see the horizon. You have to come over here to that's the spot right there.
Right here.
Yeah, and you look at the horizon, you notice that 2 hills come together roughly the same shape. And when we opened it up in 1973, we're kind of shocked. We think they used the horizon, they shaped the stone to fit that notch 4 miles away. And in Europe, they call them horizon features, either dips or notches, and they actually included them in the alignment. So from here, you can see the sun rising over the notch and the stone's well below it. But there is a stone circle right in the shadow down there, halfway between us and it. And there's a circle with a stone in the center. You stand there, your elevation's lower. The top of that rock fits into the notch, and then the sun rises 90 degrees to it on the summer solstice sunrise. It's pretty cool. And you know, you could call that a coincidence, but I don't think so, not all of that. You know? But that line right there, my son found out by Google Earth, not Google Maps, in between semesters 10 years ago, that line, he took it across New England, past Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. It goes over it, and it goes right through the center of Stonehenge, one of the big trilithons. That line goes perfectly through it. So it's one of those, you know, whether it's a coincidence or not, it just, when I saw that, you know, I got goosebumps, you know, whatever, all of them. I'm like, wow, that's kind of interesting, you know. And so that made it on America and Earth 10 years ago with Scott Walters, you know, and then, of course, the rest of the site, too. After that, we found that true south goes through, from that stone through here, through the true south wall, which I believe is a serpent. It goes to Machu Picchu in Peru. And this is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, and people should try this and see if we're in error, because we've been working on this for 10 years. We do it several times, you know, like a carpenter measured twice, cut one. Well, we did it many, many times, and so far it looks like that alignment goes right. This one here, yeah, that one right there goes to Teotihuacan, which we've been to in Mexico, north of Mexico City. It's the moon pyramid. There's a sun pyramid, moon pyramid, and Quetzalcoatl temple. So there's 3 of them. And they say that the shape of those is the belt of Orion, just like the Giza Plateau. But the moon pyramid, I didn't climb that, but I climbed the sun pyramid. But that goes right through that. The equinox goes through Chaco Canyon. We were out there about 3 years ago right now. It goes to Pueblo Bonito, the D-shaped structure at Chaco, you know, that right wherever it is, right over here. And the sunrise on equinox goes to the Canary Islands, and there are pyramids there that I never knew. When you Google it, there's the pyramids, the truncated pyramid. The Phoenicians were there too, in the Canaries too, well before the historic period. August 1st, I don't think that's on here. August 1st is a cross-quarter day, and that alignment goes to the Giza Plateau, to the Great Pyramid of Cheops. And everybody should try these, and if we're in error, please let us know, you know. But that's our best, what we can do with Google Earth. I can say whether it's coincidence or whether something else is going on. Some people believe in sacred geometry of the Earth, and that these things are tied in, and ley lines, you know, that kind of thing. I don't know, you know. But I can point out that if you go this way, you'll be there, you know, whatever, Chaco or whatever, you know. So it's interesting. It's another part of the site, you know, that seems kind of, it's like a mystery to us, you know.
Discovering new things every day still, aren't
We
you?
do, yeah. I think my dad would be very surprised. He's been gone 13 years. He didn't know anything about serpentine walls, windows, the trapezoid shape, the core building in the corner. That was all in the last several years, you know. So we're still, yeah, we are still finding things. Who knows what we'll find next?
Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, Dennis, why don't you give us your address and how people could find you?
Right, we're in North Salem, New Hampshire, and our website is stonehengeusa.com. If you go to that, there's an email address, a phone number, and also there's a 12-minute video that we show in our theater, so you can watch that. And if you go in there, you can see a free app download, and the app will take you on a complete tour. You can do it at home, and it has pictures, text, and it talks to you. Or when you use it here, you walk along, and it does the same thing, and that's a free app download on us. So they can contact us. We're open every day of the year except for Christmas and Thanksgiving. and we snowshoe in the winter. So we're here pretty much all the time.
We'll be back for snowshoeing. Right,
Make sure
Lynn?
you check this out. It's a well worth the day's trip.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Dennis. It was very insightful and amazing.
We could spend an entire day here with the wealth of knowledge that Dennis has given us, and I am sure he has much more to share, but we're going to wrap this up for today, and thank you very much.
So thank you all
Thanks
for
for
coming
joining
today.
us.
It was very, very enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you.